Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button, smash like, and comment if you think the world is darker than we imagine, because tonight's story proves it. The night air over Whitestown, Indiana was unnervingly still. Streetlights flickered weakly, casting long shadows across the neat suburban sidewalks, where freshly raked leaves rustled with each gust of wind. In a quiet cul-de-sac, number 42 stood silently, a seemingly ordinary home. But inside, chaos was about to erupt. Maria Florinda Ríos Pérez de Velásquez, a 32-year-old mother of four, adjusted the strap of her worn cleaning bag, trying to shake the exhaustion of a long day. She and her husband, both cleaners, had been hired for an evening job, an ordinary routine that had become their lifeline. But tonight, fate would turn the mundane into the unimaginable. Across the street, 62-year-old Curt Andersen sat in his dimly lit living room, the hum of his refrigerator the only background noise. A life spent quietly in this house, meticulously maintaining order and security, had left him wary. The newspaper headlines about break-ins and burglaries had always made him vigilant, even paranoid. Tonight, that caution would tip into catastrophe. At exactly 7:15 p.m., Maria and her husband approached the house. From the outside, it seemed correct. The windows, the driveway, the mailbox, they all matched the address in their schedule, but it wasn't the right house. A simple mistake, an ordinary error. That's all it took. Inside, Andersen heard a faint noise, a footstep on his front porch, a soft scrape against the door. His pulse spiked. Instinct and fear collided. He grabbed his gun, retreating to what he called his safe room, a small space lined with years of survival preparations. Every shadow seemed alive, every sound a threat. Maria knocked softly. "Hello? Housekeeping for tonight?" Her voice carried hope, professionalism, trust. Andersen heard it differently. Intrusion, danger, violation. He peeked through the peehole and froze. Two figures on his property. Not burglars, he told himself, but his mind raced with worst-case scenarios. A single gunshot shattered the calm night air. The world seemed to pause, then rushed forward in chaos. Maria crumpled to the ground, her bag spilling its contents, brushes and cleaning sprays rolling across the porch like fallen soldiers in some grotesque tableau. Her husband screamed. Andersen shouted orders, his voice trembling, frantic. Neighbors called 911, their phones shaking in panic. Sirens would arrive minutes too late. By the time the police arrived, Maria was gone. And yet the scene was baffling. No forced entry, no signs of burglary. Just a mother of four, lying in the quiet night, killed because she had knocked on the wrong door. Detectives scanned the scene with methodical precision, noting the trajectory, the position, and the gun used. Every detail contradicted Andersen's initial account, raising more questions than answers. Why shoot immediately? Why not yell? Why not warn? The air hung heavy with suspicion. And then, in the dim glow of the forensic lights, an officer found something odd behind a bush near the porch. A small notebook, partially burned, scribbled with a list of names. One name stood out, Maria's, and next to it, a notation that didn't make sense. A chill ran through the team. This was no ordinary tragedy. There was something deeper here, a thread that twisted far beyond a simple case of mistaken address. But when they opened the locked basement door, in Andersen's house, what they found changed everything. Detectives' flashlights pierced the darkness as the heavy basement door creaked open. Dust motes swirled in the air, illuminated by the stark beams of light. The smell hit them first, damp, mildew, and something faintly metallic that made their stomachs churn. Boxes were stacked haphazardly, old furniture leaning like silent sentinels. But it wasn't the clutter that made them freeze. In the far corner, partially covered by a threadbare tarp, was a small cache of firearms, ammunition, and what appeared to be surveillance equipment. Cameras, microphones, even motion sensors. Tools that suggested someone had been obsessively watching, recording, and documenting. And then there were the photographs. Hundreds of them, neatly organized in folders. Faces of neighbors, delivery drivers, and strangers. And at least one photo of Maria, taken just days before the tragedy.
Detective Harold Nguyen felt a chill run down his spine. This isn't just paranoia. This is meticulous planning, he whispered. His partner, Sarah Collins, shook her head. Or a hobby gone terrifyingly wrong. But deep down, both knew this went far beyond a simple case of a wrong door shooting. Andersen sat in the interrogation room, his hands shaking as he recounted his version of events. Calm, calculated, fearful. The contradictions were mounting. Why did he own so many weapons? Why had he photographed the victim before the shooting? Why did he claim self-defense when the evidence suggested overreaction, or worse, premeditation? The victim's family, devastated and desperate, watched from the gallery. Maria's husband, clutching their youngest child, had barely slept. Every new revelation felt like salt on an open wound. And when the detectives confronted Andersen with the basement evidence, his facade cracked. Tiny, almost imperceptible, but enough for trained eyes to see the truth simmering beneath the surface. The investigators began piecing together his past. Andersen had lived quietly for decades, never married. Neighbors called him reclusive. Yet police discovered a pattern. Disputes with neighbors, unreported incidents of threatening behavior, and complaints filed anonymously about break-ins that never occurred. Every detail painted a portrait of a man who lived in a constant state of suspicion, a mind honed for fear, not empathy. Then came the disturbing forensic discovery. On Andersen's porch, near where Maria had fallen, traces of a fingerprint on a window frame didn't match Maria, her husband, or any family member. It matched someone from Andersen's past, a man with connections to local crime investigations, now mysteriously vanished. Why was he there? What link did he have to Maria? The case, already murky, began to twist into something larger, darker, and more tangled than anyone anticipated. Even the local media smelled the scandal. Reporters began digging into Andersen's life, unearthing old lawsuits, eviction disputes, and chilling posts on obscure forums about protecting your home at all costs. Whitestown, a town that prided itself on safety, suddenly felt unsafe. Every shadowed street corner, every locked door seemed to whisper the same question. What else was hidden behind closed doors?
And just when the detectives thought they had the full picture, a neighbor came forward with a chilling account. Andersen had been seen weeks before, meeting with a stranger in the dead of night, exchanging envelopes. No one knew what was inside, but the implication was clear. Someone else was pulling strings. Someone who had a stake in what happened that night. The investigation was no longer just about Maria. It was about secrets, conspiracies, and motives buried beneath decades of fear. And as Detective Collins stared at the stack of photographs, her hand trembled. Among the faces, one was unmistakable, the missing man. And in the background of that photo, just barely visible, a shadow of someone watching the house. The stakes had just doubled. Whitestown's quiet streets were about to erupt with revelations. And somewhere, in the darkness, the next move would come from someone no one suspected. The investigation had reached a fever pitch. Detectives Harold Nguyen and Sarah Collins worked around the clock, following leads, analyzing evidence, and piecing together a timeline that grew more sinister with each revelation. Whitestown, a town where nothing ever happened, had become a labyrinth of secrets and fear. The breakthrough came from the surveillance cameras hidden around Andersen's house. Footage from the night of the shooting revealed the horrifying sequence in stark, unflinching clarity. Maria had knocked, smiling politely, unaware she was standing at the wrong address. Andersen, tense and jittery, retreated to his safe room, retrieving his gun. But what stunned investigators was the deliberate hesitation. His finger lingered over the trigger, his eyes scanning shadows that weren't moving. And then, a movement behind Maria, something only he seemed to see. The gun fired. One shot. No warning. No retreat. Meanwhile, forensic analysis of Andersen's basement revealed a shocking link. The photographs, meticulously organized, were part of a bigger obsession, a catalog of anyone he perceived as a threat. But buried underneath the camera equipment and stacks of notes was a shocking confession written in a small, trembling hand. The handwriting belonged to Andersen himself. It detailed years of paranoia, suspicion, and resentment toward anyone he felt invaded his space. He had been tracking Maria, not knowing she was an innocent cleaner. In his mind, she became a symbol of intrusion. Then came the twist no one expected. The missing man from the photographs, the one who appeared in Andersen's basement pictures, was actually a former neighbor with a grudge against Andersen. He had been conducting surveillance, feeding Andersen anonymous warnings about people coming to take what's yours. Though he never intended harm, his manipulations created the perfect storm of fear that led to Maria's death. Detectives realized that Andersen was not acting in isolation. He had been pushed over the edge by someone else's carefully planted paranoia. In court, the evidence was damning. Andersen's meticulous planning, the basement arsenal, the hidden cameras, and the confession left little room for his claim of self-defense. The jury, confronted with footage of Maria's final moments, sat in stunned silence. Her husband, tears streaming down his face, whispered the words no one wanted to hear. She didn't deserve this. Nobody does. When the verdict came, Andersen was found guilty of voluntary manslaughter. He faced decades behind bars, his life reduced to the shadows he had so carefully curated. But even as he was led away, the haunting reality remained. The missing man, though never charged, had manipulated events in a way that left one innocent woman dead and a community forever scarred. In Whitestown, the streets eventually returned to quiet, but the memory lingered. Neighbors looked twice at locked doors, wary of shadows. Maria's children grew up without her warmth, her laughter, and the simple love that had defined her life. Her husband carried the weight of guilt and grief, trying to protect the family she had built while haunted by the knowledge that one wrong turn, one mistaken knock, had ended everything. And as the town tried to move on, investigators couldn't shake the final detail: a faint set of footprints outside Andersen's basement window, leading into the woods. Whoever they belonged to, they had vanished without a trace. The killer may have been behind bars, but the darkness that had caused Maria's death had not entirely left Whitestown. The story ended in court, but in the quiet of the night, a single thought remained. Sometimes, danger isn't waiting for you. It's already watching, just beyond the wrong door.